Ancient Greece, the land of philosophers, warriors, and gods. But behind the shining marble temples and legendary myths lies a world of bizarre, shocking, and sometimes disturbing sexual practices that would leave even the most open-minded among us speechless today. From ritual orgies in the name of gods, to strange beliefs about body fluids and scandalous customs of intimacy, Greek culture was far more complex and provocative than most people realize. Tonight, we'll journey deep into the secret world of ancient Greek sexuality and uncover traditions so strange that they blur the line between the divine and the forbidden. One of the most fascinating examples comes from the worship of Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, and ecstasy. His followers believed that true liberation came through intoxication and sexual abandon. During secret nighttime ceremonies, worshippers would drink heavily, dance wildly, and surrender themselves to orgiastic rituals known as boutanalia. These events were said to erase the barriers between mortals and gods. For participants, sex was not sin, it was divine communication. Imagine hundreds of masked men and women hidden in the dark of the forests, merging their bodies and spirits in honor of their god. It was so intense that, later, even the Romans tried to outlaw it. Another practice, far more controversial by today's standards, was This was a social custom where an older man, the erased, would form a relationship with a younger boy, called the eremite. On the surface, this bond was framed as mentorship, the older man teaching politics, warfare, and philosophet. Intimacy was often part of it. In cities like Sparta, such relationships were even encouraged, thought to strengthen loyalty among soldiers. While, to us, it might sound disturbing. In their society, it was accepted as a normal and even honorable path for a boy's education into manhood. Sacred prostitution was also a part of ancient Greek culture, especially in temples dedicated to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Priestesses, and sometimes even priests, would offer sexual services to worshippers. The act was not considered dirty or sinful, but holy. The Greeks believed that through physical union with a servant of Aphrodite, they were connecting directly to the goddess herself. To them, sex was more than pleasure. It was an offering, a bridge between human flesh and divine power. Then there were the famous drinking parties, known as symposia. These gatherings were attended by the elite philosophers, poets, politicians, and wealthy men. At first, symposia were about discussion, wine, and music. But as the night went on, the atmosphere changed. Courtesans were brought in, games were played, and often the parties ended in sexual encounters of all kinds. Socrates himself is said to have attended such events, where debates about love and desire could turn into actual practice. For the Greeks, intellectual conversation, intoxication, and intimacy were all connected, was the full experience of body and mind. The Greeks were also obsessed with physical beauty, especially the male form. If you've ever seen their marble statues, you might have noticed something curious. The men are muscular and idealized, but their genitals are small. Unlike today's standards, large genitals were seen as grotesque, animalistic, and a sign of lack of control. Small ones symbolized discipline, refinement, and intelligence. To them, beauty wasn't just about size or strength, it was about balance, moderation, and harmony of the body. It's a strange standard, but it defined their art, their ideals, and even their sexual preferences. Along with these cultural values came bizarre beliefs about semen. Greek thinkers, including Aristotle, considered semen to be the very essence of life, a mystical fluid carrying a man's soul and vitality. Some believed that too much ejaculation would weaken a man's spirit, draining his energy and strength. Others thought sex could be a cure for certain illnesses, or a dangerous indulgence depending on the situation. To them, semen wasn't just a biological fluid, it was almost sacred, a symbol of power and creation. And of course, we cannot forget about the island of Lesbos, where the famous poet Sappho lived and wrote her passionate verses about women. Her poems described love, longing, and intimacy between women. At a time when female same-sex relationships were rarely spoken of openly, while male homosexuality was widely accepted, women's desire for each other was less discussed, yet it certainly existed. Sappho's legacy gave us not only timeless poetry, but also the very word lesbian. It shows that Love between women, though often hidden, still flourished in Greek society. Perhaps the most bizarre and symbolic aspect of Greek sexuality lies in their mythology. Their myths are filled with tales of gods seducing mortals, often by transforming into animals or strange forms. Zeus, the king of gods, was notorious for this. He became a swan to seduce Leda, a bull to abduct Europa, and even Golden Rain to impregnate Danae. These stories were not just entertainment, they shaped the way Greeks thought about sex and power. Desire was seen as something divine, uncontrollable, and even terrifying. By portraying gods in acts of lust and transformation, the Greeks reflected their own view that sexuality was a cosmic force, far beyond human law. So what does all this tell us? That the Greece we often admire as the birthplace of philosophy and democracy was also a society with sexual practices that shock us today. For them, sex was not only about pleasure, it was about teaching, about ritual, about beauty, about the gods themselves. Some practices disturb us, others fascinate us. But all of them reveal a world where intimacy was never just private, it was woven into religion, culture, and mythology. Ancient Greece shows us that sexuality has always been more complex than we imagine. Now the question is, if you were alive back then, would you embrace their strange traditions? Or would you run away in horror?